Welcome to Buckets. This is Action Network's WNBA betting podcast. I'm your host, Maria Marino. Happy that Brian Fonseca could join me. We are recording here on Friday morning after a bit of a late night. Liberty Lynx game one of the finals was absolute insanity. I have to say, I was at Barclays Center. I was covering the game. I was at media. I walked in the door at 1 a.m. But we are here. We are surviving because I wanted to get something out here for the weekend before game two. So Brian, thanks for doing this. And just immediate thoughts after that just crazy game one that went to overtime. Lynx steal game one in Brooklyn.
Literally stole, because the Liberty led this entire game until they didn't, and it was over.
Yeah.
I think at one point the Lynx were on an 18-2 run at the end of the fourth quarter, which eventually forced us to overtime, which that barely happened because there needed to be a foul call. Breanna Stewart makes one of two free throws. We go to overtime, and then it's like they just can't get a shot. They just can't. They can't score at all at the end. This. I don't overreact to game ones, just in general. In terms of a series, I always say weird shit happens in game one, and there's been plenty of series, even in NBA history, where a team wins game one and then they just get wiped out the rest of the series. Like, shit just happens. But the way the Liberty lost this one is pretty concerning, because you played a solid game. You were up by around 20 points earlier, and then you just absolutely collapsed in the final 5 minutes of regulation. Then in overtime, just kind of bled over to that.
So, as you can imagine, I have a lot of thoughts. Look, yes. Obviously, our finals preview leaned heavily toward the Liberty taking the series, and that hinged a lot on game one. And why was that? I don't think that we were dumb. I think that game one, the situation, particularly with the rest, was a clear advantage for New York. And in the first half, it looked like it was going, sort of exactly to plan. The Lynx looked a little sluggish. Liberty had like a 29 or 30 point first quarter. And credit, excuse me, credit to the
long night, guys.
Yeah. Credit to the Lynx and Cheryl Reeve. Obviously, they're extremely prepared. They're a great team. I knew they weren't going to go away. They had a much better second quarter than first quarter. So they actually held. Okay, so New York scored 32 in the first. They only scored 12 in the second. So like the writing started to be kind of on the wall where, okay, we know this is going to be a game. Now, we didn't really talk about the spread for game one a whole lot in our finals preview, Brian. And I think it's because we were all kind of staying away from it, because I felt like at the time, I think it was like 6.5. I just felt like that was a touch high. But at the same time, I was like, well, the Liberty can dominate, right? But the Liberty have this like sort of Jekyll and Hyde about them, where if they want to be dominant, they can be dominant. And then there are times where it looks like they just settle a little bit, clearly. So anyway, going back to the second half of this ball game, first of all, just to talk about like how crazy this is. So I saw a graphic. So record of WNBA teams in playoffs when trailing by 15 plus points in the final 5 minutes of regulation is now 1-183. So this is an unprecedented comeback. Some tidbits about the box score, which I find just insane. Let's look at rebounding. Liberty won the rebounding battle 44-32. They had 20 offensive rebounds.
Yeah.
And they still lost this game. Not to mention, I just have to say, if the Liberty won this game, and Jim Turvey talked about this on our finals preview, Jonquel Jones for MVP was looking hella strong, right?
Plus
Which
2,800 before the series started.
he actually got it. We saw it at like plus 3,400.
Really? Oh,
Yes.
Jesus. All
And
right.
so let's look at her stat line. JJ, 9 of 14 from the floor, 24 points, 10 boards. Now, I feel so bad for JJ because not only did she play great and did like everything they generally needed her to do, in the overtime frame, she had a huge corner three to keep them in it. And she had a steal and score. And I'm like, oh my God, JJ is like gonna win them this game. But the Lynx just had one more play in them. And first off, first shout out on the Lynx has to go to Courtney Williams. Absolute dog. I was thinking
Yes.
like dog. And I just saw like a hilarious clip of her that Nafisa posted to her Instagram. I'm gonna suggest Action Network Social post this, so be on the lookout for it. But I guess it was like probably the day before media availability, and I think somebody asked her about like being the underdog in the series, and she was just basically like, "I don't care if we're an underdog as long as we're a dog," like in her like Southern accent or something. It was hilarious, but like so fitting. And coming into this too, we talked about this on the finals preview as well. Courtney Williams has been to 2 finals with Connecticut and wasn't able to, obviously win. She has been clutch throughout her career. Like if you've followed the WNBA, she certainly has a history of clutch shooting. I think I saw she had 11 clutch points in this game. But then you obviously needed Nafisa with the game winner. Or the go-ahead bucket, whatever you want to call it, that little turnaround. I think Stewie was guarding her, right? But then, let's talk about Stewie for a second. I'm sorry, we just need to unpack all this.
Yeah. No, this is important.
Okay.
This is important because
So,
it leads to how
Brian,
we're going to look at game 2.
You're essentially my therapist at this moment, just like listening
I
to
don't
me
know
and
if I'd be good at that.
trying to make sense of this. Okay. Brianna Stewart, well documented on this pod, how she's pretty much played great this season. Obviously, first team all WNBA. Last postseason struggled. Uncharacteristically low shooting percentages from the floor and from 3. And she definitely played with that sort of chip on her shoulder against Vegas, understandably so, and sort of avenged that loss. Now, I didn't think that the Liberty were going to be victims of a letdown here, considering that they also have this revenge mindset against Minnesota because they won the season series, they won the Commissioner's Cup. Now, Stewie, played a decent game overall, but in the clutch, really struggled, and it was pretty tough to watch that. So she gets a chance, first of all, to win the game in regulation.
Yeah.
She's at the free throw line. I believe they were down 1. So you need 1 to tie, 1 to essentially win the game because there's only a few seconds left. And this was after, mind you, a lengthy review to determine how much time was left on the clock when the foul occurred. So whether or not that may have, she kind of referenced it in the presser, like somebody asked her, like, whatever, we'll get there. But not that she was making an excuse by any means, but somebody asked her, like, what were you thinking going into those free throws? And she was just like, I was just thinking, make the shot. She's like, but like, I was thinking that throughout the entire like review, just like, gotta make these. So, I mean, that's kind of, I knew going into that, I'm like, this is tough. She had already missed a free throw earlier in the game too. Makes the first collective like eruption from the crowd at Barclays. Like, okay, first one's in the can. We're, they're still alive. Misses the second.
In and out.
And I'm thinking this ain't going to be good because Minnesota just had that momentum. They clearly became energized. And then when overtime happened, I'm just sitting there thinking, the Liberty are playing scared. Like the
Yeah.
first few minutes of overtime, Brian, like just not aggressive, turning the ball over, sloppy, no leadership, no somebody taking initiative. And that's not to say, like I said, JJ made great plays. I think Sloot made some great plays down the stretch, but there wasn't like from the tip of overtime, there wasn't like the okay, we got this. It was like we're hanging on,
Mhm.
and that's what they did. They hung on, and then Stewie gets another chance. With the clock winding down, she's going in transition. Look at the bucket and tell me what you thought about the final shot by Stewie, because what I saw, the replay that I saw, is she's dribbling up the court. I thought she could have just gone for your standard layup, but she was using her right hand, Brian, and she actually like reversed.
Yeah.
So her right hand actually was coming on the left side of the basket, and that was like a little bit of an awkward angle, and the shot is missed. They lose the game. So, um, thoughts by you on this?
So the last possession, and Brianna Stewart, I mean, a lot of people are using the C word, choked, which I try not to do with athletes, especially in these ridiculously high leverage situations. But she goes for a reverse layup there. Um, High school coaches would be like, hey, use your left hand. I also think on the drive, she seemed surprised that she didn't get as much contact as she perhaps expected, because you remember at well, really the play before this, but also at the end of regulation, like every drive she was getting like just destroyed.
Mauled, yeah.
Yeah. And not even in a way where like, oh, they should have absolutely called a foul on everything. It's just playoff shit. It's just
Yeah.
WNBA finals physicality. And if people have never watched WNBA playoffs until now, these playoffs are very physical. You should have watched the last series with the Sun and the Lynx. A lot of physicality. And that means, in some regard, you can't call everything. So she gets the ball, and I'm rewatching it now as we're talking about it, just to make sure I'm not wrong here. But she actually, it's a nice pass from Sabrina Ionescu. From Sabrina Ionescu throws the ball. Brianna Stewart gets it over her right shoulder, immediately goes over her right shoulder, and she's by Nafisa Collier at this
Yeah.
point. And she's driving down. I thought she was actually going to pull up like right inside the free throw line for a jumper or a floater or
Yeah.
something along those lines. She takes it all the way to the rack, which is probably the right play in this situation, because
Of the
really
time.
stand yeah, like really standing in her way. Courtney Williams is there, and it's like, all right, you should be able to get a shot off over Courtney Williams, with all due respect, especially if you're Brianna Stewart and you're a
Mhm.
four. Courtney Williams is
Yeah.
is a combo guard, and really the decision to go with the reverse layup there while you're being contested over your right shoulder, that's the tough one. It's like, go up with your left hand,
Or
or
just go decisively strong with your right.
try to, yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say, try to initiate more contact. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like try to actually like try to draw some contact on that side, because that's where the attempt at a rejection was coming from. I mean, this is all hindsight and things like that.
Yeah.
Like if she makes that layup, obviously we're not talking about this play at all. We're talking about overtime number two, which would have happened if she made the shot. But like those are the little things there, and it's like it's worrisome, because I'm somebody who backed like Brianna Stewart for Finals MVP, while also acknowledging, hey, Jonquel Jones at plus 2,800 is probably worth a look, and now that number I guarantee is dropped, because Minnesota kind of plays without a traditional, like they don't have a Jonquel Jones, right? Like
Right.
they don't have a traditional center. And in that regard, like Sabrina Ionescu, you think she's gonna have her hot and cold games potentially against this backcourt. Um, and Brianna Stewart last night, she looked okay up until that point, but she also shot very inefficiently again. But
Yes.
she's had some massive, massive games against this team this year, including like a 38 and 18 or 38 and 17. and the efficiency hasn't always been there, but the production was. And yesterday, when they kind of needed it, the production, it wasn't just her. It was like I felt like, and to your point, you talked about this a little bit, where they were kind of settling in overtime. I felt like at some point, and this is where I thought they were going to lose the game. This was like 2.5 minutes left, and they were kind of like, "All right, let's settle for another Jonquil Jones 3-pointer." And it's like, why
Yeah.
isn't someone trying to like actively,
Yeah.
legitimately make a play, make some shit
So,
happen?
right. And I think I'll say this too for Sabrina, because she had an awful shooting night, 8 of 26. But she did show some life in the overtime. She made
Yeah.
two baskets in overtime. And I'm thinking, okay, like once again, with her and JJ kind of scrapping together plays, I was like, they might be able to pull it out. Didn't happen. But in general, Liberty shot like 38%, while Minnesota shot 51%. Minnesota shot 41% from three.
Mm-hmm.
New York shot looks like 39% from three, so not too crazy there. That's the other thing. You wasted a gem from Leo. Bebish came out and did the damn thing. 17 points, 5 threes, and once again, I'm getting shades of the finals last year, Brian. Between everything with Stewie, and then remember game 1 last year against Vegas? Maureen Johannes had 5 threes.
Johannes, I was gonna
And
say,
again,
yeah.
going into a game like this, going into a series like this, you can't count on your role players to do that every night, but you sure as hell have to take advantage of the nights when they do that, because that's the X factor, right? So, anywho, complete collapse by the Liberty, epic, gritty win by the Lynx. Let's look ahead to how we approach this from a betting perspective. First off, game 2, the spread opened at like Liberty -6. Now I'm seeing 7s and 7.5s. I don't love, to be honest, I don't love 7.5. I think that the Liberty are gonna come out with a vengeance. One stat we have to share, or trend, from our friend and colleague Matt Moore over at Buckets NBA. Okay, finals at home, lost previously as a favorite, home and favored in the following game. Teams are 8-0 straight up, 7-0-1 ATS. If it's a finals game 2, 5-0 straight up, 4-0 ATS. So that tells you to lean Liberty, but at the same time, no team had ever freaking come back from 15 points down with under 5 minutes to go. So there's that. Brian, what is your play for game 2, which is, by the way, Sunday, 3:00 Eastern? Everybody's got plenty of time to regroup.
Liberty first half, which I think we identified as -3.5, -4-ish. It's probably going to be 4.5. Hopefully not 5, but something along those lines by the time you hear this, because the Liberty are getting a lot of steam right now. Understandably so, because I mean they outplayed the Lynx for 35 minutes before everything went haywire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I, first of all, for whatever reason, and the first half could scare you a little bit. Like there's a discussion to be had. Like, hey, is it better to take the first quarter? And I'd entertain that. So I'm gonna settle on one or the other. For now, it's half, but I could change my mind after this drops, just because the Lynx, for whatever reason, especially in that Connecticut Sun series, they've been really like good in second quarters. They've been scoring in second quarters, like at a high clip. It's like 20 plus, 20 plus, 20 plus, like all the time. And the Liberty also, though, like they've been very good in second quarters, generally speaking, like throughout the year and things of that nature. To me,
I think Liberty, sorry
yeah,
to interrupt, I think they've been better in first quarters overall, but continue.
yeah, and I think one of those is the way to go. Like, just take the hot start and don't worry about the sweat from the end of the game, because that's 7.5. Now we're getting into territory where I'm like, you really don't think the Lynx are going to cover this again?
Right, right.
It shouldn't, but
Right, they shouldn't, but I just think that Nafisa Collier, has a look in her eye, man. Like she's like,
Courtney Williams too.
well, yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so wait, before we move on, anything else you want to say about just first half or first quarter?
Yeah, I would say like that's where I'm going. Um, I don't know where I'm gonna look for like in terms of props and things of that nature. That one's gonna be tough. Like maybe there's a
Maybe
Breonna Stewart bounce back somewhere.
or Sab bounce back.
I think Jonquel Jones rebounds are going to be interesting all series long just because of the Lynx situation. In the front court, she had 10 the first game. Breonna Stewart had 9, and she had double digits in every single game against this team during the regular season, sometimes way over 10. And yeah, we'll see what happens otherwise. But I mean, the team shot 39% from three on
Right.
good volume, like 33 threes a game. They took way more threes than the Lynx did, but they were bad from the field. And that's sort of what they have to figure out. It's like, all right, when you attack the basket, can you finish? They
Right.
struggled with that. And then that in between game as well. So I think that's particularly where Breonna Stewart's going to have to come into play.
So I just pulled up the box score from July 2nd, which was actually a Liberty win, their lone regular season
The one we
win.
all went to.
That's right. The one we all went to.
Yeah.
And that was also a couple of days after the Commissioner's Cup. So essentially kind of like a game, a simulated game too, if you will. Obviously
Sure, yeah.
not the same stakes. But while, Sabrina had 17, Stewie also had 17, and they were both, in positive, like plus minus. They still didn't shoot like great. Like Stewie was 5 of 20 from the floor and 0 of 5 from 3 in that game. And Sabrina only made 1 of her 10 3-point attempts. So look, I mean, well, I'll add this too. Stewie also had 17 boards. John Cole had 12 boards. But it was, even though it was a win, that if you remember, Brian, we were at the game. It was still a tight ball game late, and the reason that New York won is they just really dialed in on defense. Minnesota only scored 8 in that fourth quarter, which is kind of nuts. So if I remember correctly, some people probably had Minnesota to cover the spread, and they probably didn't. And they were like, "What the hell? 8 points in the fourth? What the hell?" Anyway, I say all that to say that look, the Lynx have been one of the best defensive teams all year, and it's still not going to be easy. They're just so disciplined on defense. Like they just play as a team, and Nafisa is freaking legit. Like that was it that block on JJ at the end of game 1? That was insane. So props to Fee. So yeah, we touched on props. Let's talk about the series. So, I guess I'll ask you, what are your potential plays on the series now that we know what happened in game 1?
I think if you think the Liberty are still going to win this series, I don't think you play series straight up because I feel like it has to be in 5. We have too much of a sample size to sort of indicate that they won't win 3 straight against a team that they've frankly been struggling with all season long.
Yeah.
And just blew that game 1 against. Like, I think they're going to, and also if you think the Liberty are going to win the series, you have to hit them before game 2 starts, because they'll probably win game 2 and then you'll lose value on that. And if they don't win game 2, you're probably fucked, because there's never been a sweep or a sweep after, being down 2-0, like
right.
in like no one's come back in
Right.
WNBA finals history. And even though the Liberty are clearly one of the best regular season teams we've really ever seen in the WNBA, they're not going to win 3 straight against the Lynx. I just don't see that.
Okay, quick thoughts. Just to talk about how the series prices have changed. So going in, Liberty were minus 290, Lynx plus 235. Now, interestingly, I'm still seeing New York minus 104.
Me too.
Minnesota minus 112. So, I mean, kind of a toss up there. But I am intrigued at the idea of this going 5 games.
Yes.
So to your point about we don't think the Liberty are going to come back and win 3 straight. Keep in mind, they did that last year in the semis against Connecticut, but that's also Connecticut and not this Minnesota team. Do you remember that?
I like Connecticut very much. And look, and you
I'm
know
not
what?
trying to knock Connecticut. I'm just saying I
No,
don't
I know
think
what you mean.
how with it, just the what would you call it? The moxie of this Minnesota team. Like that would be a
They have a
call.
little bit more offensive punch than the Sun do.
Correct.
As much as I love the Sun, and they might still have the best defense in the league, they don't have an Afisa Collier.
Right.
And they don't have a Courtney Williams at this point. And also Kayla McBride Kayla McBride might, if you put her on the Sun right now, she's a top 1 or 2 scorer on that team. Like
So
easily.
here are the scenarios I could see being plausible. Lynx in 4.
That's on the table. Which right now we should say plus 285.
Okay. Or there is an option where you can just pick the series to go to 5 games without picking a winner, and that's plus 118. I'm very intrigued by that.
Same.
And then there's Liberty in 5. Do you have the odds for that by
225.
chance?
Plus 225. It's plus 220 last night, plus 225 now, for whatever reason.
For Liberty in 5.
Yes. And if people are interested in, hey, if you do actually think they win 3 straight like they did against the Connecticut Sun last year, because the Sun last year in the playoffs, like they beat Minnesota in Minnesota, I believe, and then they beat the Liberty in Brooklyn in back-to-back games.
Well, and also you brought this up to me before the show, like Minnesota, like I was thinking, okay, Connecticut took Minnesota to 5 games. Like theoretically, New York should be able to take Minnesota to 5 games. And Minnesota lost game 1. That's the difference. They lost game 1 at home. Now New York loses game 1 at home. So like it's certainly possible for this to go 5. I think it's very possible, in fact.
After game 1, I was texting Jim Turvey. I was like, you think the Sun could win this in 4 games? Like I was talking crazy. I was like, because again,
when you drop game 1 at home, it changes everything.
Especially because and I don't like to overreact to game 1s again, but this is a 5-game series. It's not a 7-game series. We will have 7-game series soon in the WNBA, but not this season. It was a 5-game series, and they came back and they beat the Sun. Look, it looked like the Sun could have won game 5 or very early on, and then the Lynx just smacked them.
Right.
And they were at home. Like this series could play out honestly very similarly, and every game is different. It's worth mentioning, because we're talking about this, the Liberty to win this series in 4 games is plus 370. So if you actually do think the Liberty are going to win game 2 at home and then 3 and 4 in Minnesota, which good luck with that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's going to be very tough, but that's plus 370. So you get some great value on that. Lynx 3-2 is plus 520.
So that's essentially them.
Minnesota closes in Barclays.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Like the Aces did last year, actually.
Right. Well, that's the thing, and that's why I'm hesitant about Liberty in 5, because I think if it goes 5, it's just like game 7. Anything can happen in a winner take all game for the championship, and so it might be a little bit of the safer play, but I'm considering, like I said, like just the series flat out to go 5, because unfortunately, the Liberty have provided some doubts here in game 1 and last year against the finals, just as far as closing it out, putting them away. So I kind of worry about a game 5. Obviously we don't want to put the cart before the horse too much. I think we can make a smart bet right now, but then obviously as the series progresses, we'll evaluate game 5 if it gets there more specifically. But to recap sort of what we like, Brian is definitely going Liberty first half or possibly first quarter. So first half would be 3.5, 4. First quarter would be like 2, Liberty -2.
Yeah.
I think I like the series to go 5 games around plus 118. Would also consider Minnesota in 4, but I'm not 100% there yet. I'm not there yet, but I think those are the most 2 likely scenarios. Am I like, what do you
Lynx
think?
in 4 or Liberty in 5?
Kind of. Um,
I'm very intrigued by Liberty in 5
you
at plus
know,
225.
what else I was going to say too, when you're talking about finals MVP, I think if you're interested in betting the Liberty, like we already said, that if you just flat out bet the Liberty to win the series right now, there's really no value there. I would look to finals MVP instead.
That's how I played it earlier, and I took Stewie before game 1.
And what did you have her at before game 1?
Plus 110. So I imagine there's way better value now.
Yeah, so now I'm seeing finals MVP, Fee plus 125, Stewie plus 270.
Yeah.
I feel like
I'm gonna have to double down, aren't I?
Unless Stewie like wins you games. Like I think game 2 is going to be fine. I think Liberty are going to be fine, but beyond that, like in order to sort of overturn the narrative from game 1, Stewie would have to really like make game winning plays. You know, Sab is plus 500. I think Courtney Williams, this is another name that came up on our finals preview pod, is really intriguing at plus 650. I mean, she, you know, Fee was absolutely great down the stretch, but Courtney Williams, that 3-point, you know, the 3-pointer to force overtime essentially, makes the free throw on the Sabrina foul, which that was so hard to watch.
What's Kayla McBride?
Plus 2,700. She actually had a sneaky good game. I feel bad that we haven't brought her up yet because
you know I was going to.
She had 17 points. So I mean
22.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the damn Commissioner's Cup game again. My bad. I'm sorry. She had 22. Sorry, Kayla. I was looking at the wrong box score. You had 22. You were amazing. Great job.
4 threes. And the reason why I bring her up is because for whatever reason against the Connecticut Sun, she couldn't quite, like, she didn't have a game until the final game of the series, where the Sun just looked beaten down at this point. I think this is a better matchup for her because in terms of locating her on defense, she's going to be, like, it's going to be tough for the guards and the wings to keep up with her in this series than it was against the Connecticut Sun, who are just more disciplined and better defensively, specifically on the perimeter.
Well, again, it's hard to overturn narratives. And if you're the road team and you win game 1, whoever made you win that game, they're going to have a real head start in sort of the finals MVP conversation. On the flip side, I think if the Liberty had won game 1, it would be Jonquel Jones all day.
Yes.
Just for her performance. She's now at plus 1,000. But I wonder about, again, like, making the game-winning plays, which she, like I said, she did in game 1, but just the consistency of being able to sustain that throughout a series, in terms of, I'm sure she's going to play great, but again, finals MVP, it's just like sort of a different narrative. So, and then I would just mention too that, like, top point scorer is very much correlated. Like the finals MVP and the top point scorer markets are very similar. So kind of the same, I would apply the same logic to that. So I think we've basically hit on all the angles for now. I feel like we had to really digest that game 1 upset. I think we have a few good ideas for, you know, how to bet moving forward. Ooh, could game 2 be a Bridget Carlton spot? That's the other prop, because we've enjoyed some Bridge here in the pod in the past, and they did a really good job of neutralizing her. But she seems to find a way to go off from 3 at one point or another. So that's one other thing to mention. All right, we got to get out of here. You guys have heard us ramble on long enough. Thank you, as always, for listening to Buckets WNBA. Brian Fonseca, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And once again, I'm your host, Maria Marino. We will be back. I think game 3 is Wednesday. So we will, you know, be ready with a podcast overnight Tuesday into Wednesday, so you can get ready for game 3. And let's get buckets.